Well, I want to welcome everybody. We meet here every Monday night at 5 o'clock California time I'm here to do basically Q&A on intimacy disorders, sex addiction, really sexual avoidance, being married to a sex addict, love addiction, and all the issues that surround it. And we volunteer and give this time away because I understand that there aren't many, move a little bit here, there aren't many resources for you to find this kind of information, and certainly not without cost. So this is our chance to try to deliver you some message, get you some information without you necessarily having to run to a therapist to get it, because you've got one for free right here, and we're here every week. So this is a gift that we get to give. So I'm excited about it.
I'm glad you're here again. I was just emailing with somebody who's in a remote area of not the U.S., and they were talking about that there aren't resources. So I'm grateful that we make these resources available to anyone, anywhere, and truly at any time. Now, while you're live in this moment, the podcasts are there 24/7, and they can watch some of the previously recorded things. So those resources really can be a lifeline, any time of the day or night. So, okay. First question. I am 4 months into recovery with a sponsor. 2 weeks ago, I started dating again. I've met a lady I like a lot, and I'm trying to put my recent learning into practice. I've read that dating once or twice a week for the first month or two is recommended. Do you have guidelines for dating frequency and for phone or other contact early in a relationship?
Yeah, I think that people who don't have the issues that we have don't necessarily need the guidelines, but for those of us who get a little bit overly enthusiastic about the possibility of love or sex, we do need guidelines. And so it's a good question to ask. And I think it's also person specific, so I can only give you some general ideas. I think that unfortunately, for some of us, when we get offered up the possibility of love, and maybe it's something we haven't had in a long time, maybe it's something we never had. For some of us, all of our feelings can come rushing up at once. It's like this person becomes the perfect person, and we idealize them, and they can do nothing wrong. And in part, that's a little bit about what getting to date someone and knowing is a little bit of like that kind of romantic flavor, but also a part of it is when the possibility that my needs might be met show up, those of us who didn't get what we needed when we were younger can find ourselves overly enthusiastic about the wrong people early on. We get too committed, too involved. We don't see them for who they are, but rather for what they might offer us, love, consistency, and rather not notice that they're struggling themselves. So dating for those of us who have these issues should be a slow process. I believe it's a process that's best done without sex for a while, maybe at least a month or two. Because when we are sexual, we start to bond with people in ways that aren't necessarily good for us if we're not good discerners, if we're not good at picking the right people. It's best to keep a little distance. A date is a visit to a ugly coffee shop in a brightly lit place, driven there by people in two different cars who leave there after an hour of talking in two different cars. Those of us who have these issues don't do well with highly romanticized situations in early dating, candlelight, wine, music. It's just not good for us because we already tend to lose ourselves. And so holding on to ourselves is best done in a bright light. And the third thing I would say is that, dating once or twice a week. Yeah. And what is a date? A date is an hour or two spent going for a walk. A date is a hike. A date is, it's not necessarily deep, heavy romance, dinner, wine. Try to keep your dates light in the beginning. Try to get to know the person. That really is the goal. And just another quick thing about dating that comes up. A lot of times people will say, well, how soon do I let someone I'm dating know I have a problem with intimacy or sex? And I would say that, you want to let people know a little bit about you as you go along, but not everything all at once. So I wouldn't necessarily say to anyone I was dating the first 3 weeks, I'm a sex addict. But I might say, I've really struggled with intimacy and relationships for a long time, and I'm hoping that it works out well for us, and then leave it there. And then maybe a few weeks later, so slowly revealing myself, giving the person a chance to understand the larger picture and not, I'll say one more thing about that. Sometimes when we rush to tell someone everything about us, it's because we want their immediate acceptance. And we want to know that they're not going to leave us, they're not going to let us down, they're always going to love us, and we want to know that in the first week. So we're going to tell them everything about us so they'll never reject us. If they're not going to reject us, then And that's not really how you build a relationship. You do it little bits at a time, little pieces at a time, and you live in the fear that you may or may not be loved, or you may or may not be accepted by this person, because living in that fear is part of dating.
Great answer. And okay, so the next one, I consider myself to be a sex addict, but main struggle is porn addiction. Although I can constantly seek attention from women and used to go to clubs, bars to look for casual sex, I never went to see prostitutes or acted out in other ways. Only consensual one-night stands if I got lucky, or relationships based on sex, which always ended terribly. A friend of mine regularly watches porn, goes to prostitutes, and acts out sexually way more than I do, yet he functions very well. He has a good job, beautiful house, and his relationship with others are functional, etc. My question is, if sexual addiction is measured by the severity or level of sexual acting out behaviors, why my friend seems to function well while I can't function when I act out sexual behaviors I described?
Well, I think that it's never a good idea to sort of compare my process to someone else's, because we're all so different. And whatever pain you have gone through to lead you to have this problem, and whatever pain you live with in struggling with it, is just different than someone else's. And by the way, we have the saying in recovery about not comparing my insides to someone else's outsides, because we tend to do this a lot. It's part of our vulnerability as an addict. And so just because someone else might look like they have it all together, or it looks like their relationship, you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. So what I hear is someone who really wants to get it right and really wants to have a good dating experience. And I think that you can only do that by being in your own and not comparing it to anyone else's. And also, your struggles with recovery are yours, and they're different than someone else's. How you experience a slip at what it means to you could be, oops, I made a mistake. Well, I got to fix that one. I'll plug up that hole and move on, the hole in my plan. On the other hand, you could be someone who says, I had a slip. I hate myself. I don't know if I want to live. I don't deserve living. How could I slip? I've seen everything across the board and in between. It depends on your own resilience, your own life experience. So I think it's best to just stick with your recovery and your process of dating, and leave how other people are doing to them.
Yeah, I think that that's really valid. It's never been about, well, if I drink X amount, then I'm an alcoholic. But if I stay on the other side of that line, then I'm not. So it really is how it's affecting you. And I was thinking the same thing when you talked about, looking at what your friend does. It's like looking at Facebook. Everybody's life looks so amazing on Facebook, but that doesn't really show the reality of anybody's life. It just shows the sliver that they want you
The
to see.
highlights.
So yeah, and the highlights and the nice stuff, not the negative. So I mean, his life could be completely out of control, but he's looking like he's functioning from the outside.
And may I just say that anybody over 35, dating sucks. I mean, you know it, I know it. Dating sucks, because you're old enough to know yourself well enough to know if you think you're going to get, it's not like when you're 20 and, oh, that person's fabulous, and then 6 weeks later you realize they're not, because you're too young and stupid to know any better. You know better now. You know when you want to date someone and when you don't. So it's just a harder process when we get older. And I would really recommend you be kind to yourself around it.
Yeah, and I think the seeking, like the behaviors you're describing, and whether it's porn or sex addiction, it sounds like an intimacy disorder, and it sounds like it's problematic for you. So, I think getting help for what's bothering you is what will be most effective. So, okay, next one. I recognize that everyone is different. So true. But can you describe an addict's brain thinking once in recovery? I stay with him for the rest of our marriage. Will my husband still objectify attractive women when we're out? Will sex still occupy most of his thinking? How will I know that he's present when we're having sex and that he's not using me to numb check out?
Well, that's more than one question, Tammy.
Yes, I know.
Can you break that one down for me?
Sure, let's go with, can you describe an addict's brain thinking once in recovery? And you don't indicate how long in recovery, but so maybe talk about some stages of,
in terms of
well,
what?
so she's going, if I stay with him, will he still have the same objectifying behavior? Will he still be checked out while we're having sex? I mean, so will he still have all the thinking that he's had while he's in active recovery?
Yeah, I think that it's a timeline issue, and it's also individual. Again, I've talked to spouses who say, can I trust? He seems to be going to meetings. He seems to be kinder. He seems to be showing up. He's not perfect, but and should I trust that? And you can only trust what you see and feel. Certainly some spouses will do detective work, but you can only trust what you see and feel. Um, you have to remember that the person that you're with is still going to have attractions to other people, and that's normal and healthy. So how does he manage those attractions? In other words, if I was married to someone and I was sitting across the table from them and they noticed somebody, let's say a waitress, and she was attractive, and I saw them look up and say, oh, and then look back at me, I don't think I would think much of that, even if they were a sex addict, because it's human to look up and say, oh, I find that person attractive, even if you're a sex addict. But does he stare? Does he leave you emotionally? Does he, you're talking to him and he's not even present? Does he chat up the waitress when he's up at the salad bar and you're still sitting at the table? We can't control the thoughts that go through our heads. And they say in some of the 12-step programs around sexual recovery that it will take years for the lust of the mind to drain away, is one of the things they say in program. And I would say that, I don't know that the lust of the mind ever fully drains away, because it's part of being human. But I do think that being more considerate of how my partner is feeling. So as an active sex addict and a married one, when I'm with my partner, I am much more deliberate about not looking at that person, about not staring at that person. It's not because I don't have a desire to, or I don't find them attractive, but I want to respect my partner. And I understand that my partner, he or she, is feeling like, oh, well, if you're looking at that, doesn't that mean you want it? Doesn't it mean you don't want me? Doesn't that mean because you're married to a sex addict and you don't know what it means when we're looking? So I would want to be extra careful. The question I would have for you is, have you told him how you feel? I think it would be useful to say, when we go to dinner and you're staring at the waitress's butt, or when, I feel really offended, I feel like you don't care, if you're not aware of it, could you please become aware of it? Because a lot of sex addicts are not aware that they lose themselves for a couple of minutes. I don't know what you mean, I was just looking that way. They don't even get it. So depending on who he is, where he is in this process, how aware he or she is of your feelings, and how much you are able to tolerate the fact that he is going to be attracted to other people, but hopefully not act on it, and that you can accept that he is a human being and is attracted. I mean, all of those pieces are moving and changing. So I can't answer the question directly for you. I can say, yes, a sex addict in recovery will occasionally find other people attractive, and you will notice, and that is not necessarily a bad thing. As a consistent thing, and what Tammy said, by the way, is important. Is he 3 months into this process or 2 years? At 3 months, I would expect he'd be sort of going to drag his chin away from looking at that person, because it's hard in the beginning. But if he's 3 years, you should be feeling a lot more respected. So there are a lot of layers to this, how much you've communicated about it, where he is in his recovery, what is healthy and normal, and what is not being respectful of you. There are all kinds of pieces to this, but you are asking the right questions.
So the next question, I've asked before about acting out with escorts, never dating, and being in SAA, 25 years old. There is an available recently divorced woman, 42, that we have been, that we have had only reached oral sex before, creeping her out by asking way too many private questions and not knowing anything about boundaries.
Okay.
So I want to reach out to her, maybe to have a consistent friend with benefits as I continue my therapy and 12-step work. Would reaching out to her hinder my recovery?
Yes.
I
Don't reach out to her.
Yeah.
Or are we supposed to be more?
No, I was like, there's a one-word answer for that one. Yes.
Don't.
Yeah. Don't.
And I will say, as I say often, that most of us go through actions every single day and we don't question our actions. I want to go to dinner, I want to go to lunch, I have something to do, I have an errand. But when you find yourself saying, I'm not sure this is really a good idea that I do this and it's in recovery, number one, it's really glad that you ask. And most of the time, it's not a good idea.
Okay, next one. I'm conflicted about having sex with my porn-addicted partner. 6 months ago, I realized he had filmed me with another person without consent and had a significant porn addiction. We have both committed to working out our 26-year relationship. I believe intimate physical contact can help us comfort one another and rebuild our intimacy, and yet feel that perhaps this could be hurtful, that it won't encourage him to work on his own stuff.
So Tammy, can you put that in question form? Because I think some of the narratives leave it hard for everyone to understand.
Yes.
Like, what is the question?
So the concern is if I have sex with my porn addicted partner, will that discourage him from working on his stuff, or would that help rebuild intimacy?
Well, I think let me turn the question upside down for you.
Okay.
I don't think that if I would not be having sex with someone that I love because it was good for them or not good for them. That's not a good reason to have sex with someone. You have sex with somebody you love because you love them, you want to be closer to them, mostly because you trust them and feel safe with them, and you want to be closer in some undefinable way that sex brings us. So, if you feel you want to be closer to him, you're feeling more trusting of him, you're feeling more loving toward him, and it's a part of his program, I think sex is wonderful, especially if he's a porn addict, because I would much rather see him engaging with real human beings than paper dolls, so to speak, or pixels. But if you have a lived experience that having sex with him is like being one of those paper dolls, and you feel like he's not really being sexual with you, but more like squinting his eyes and thinking about all those images, and you're not feeling trusting, then why would you have sex with someone you don't trust? And that's one of my biggest statements for every spouse who says, well, if I have sex with him or her, maybe they won't go and do this. Or if I go have sex with them, maybe they will be closer. And I will say to you, base whether you want to be sexual with your partner on whether you trust them, whether you feel like you want to be close to them, and you want to open up yourself to them, not because you think it's good for them or bad for them, because they're going to be however they're going to be in their recovery, whether you have sex with them or not, because guess what? Your having sex with them has nothing to do with their recovery.
Okay. So what is it supposed to feel like healthy dating? I've never had it. I've had rushed, fantasized experiences that have led me to narcissists. I want a nice guy, this is from a female, that I find hot. Second question, what does it mean when a guy says, I'm emotionally unavailable? Thanks.
Okay.
So let's
those
start
are
with the first one.
okay.
What does healthy dating feel like?
Healthy dating is a process of something that grows over time, and it grows with a lot of excitement and enthusiasm, and it usually gets to kind of a plateau and it stays there for a while. Healthy dating is moving from I like how I feel when I'm with you to I like you. That's healthy dating. Healthy dating is I feel good when I'm around you and I want to figure out why. Who are you? What is it about you that makes me feel good? What is it about you that I like? Healthy dating is about slowly discovering who that other person is, provided you feel that you enjoy and feel comfortable in their presence to begin with. And at the same time, it's also keeping an eye on whether they show interest in you, whether they, so I believe in dating plans. I believe that women who have struggled to date the right guy and end up dating losers, it's not that you can't date, it's just you don't know how. And you expect yourself, like any other woman, to be able to choose the losers from the good guys and the players from the non-play, but you don't. Those of us who have early wounds will have all of our emotions come rushing up at us with the possibility that someone that might love us. And when we have that possibility of that person who might love us and meet our needs, many of us who come to these rooms lose our ability to discriminate. So I have seen that woman who wanted who wanted the right guy, and she told me exactly who the right guy was, then say to me, well, I'm dating this guy, and well, he is a heroin addict, and well, he is married, but he's really, really nice. And it's like, yeah, but you wanted to have a relationship, but I'm having so much fun, but you wanted to have a relationship. So part of the problem for us is that when our emotional selves get overly invested in dating, we stop seeing the person intellectually and we lose our perspective. This is to be expected. Just like if I were to pour alcohol down Tammy's mouth, she would start drinking again. It's to be expected that someone who starts drinking as an alcoholic will keep drinking. So what can you do? Take your time. Check out who you're dating with your friends. I can't give that advice enough. If you have this desire to think, well, he wouldn't get along with my friends, or I want to keep this over here for a while, I would pay attention to that, because people I like, I want them to know the people I know right, as soon as possible. I want them to become a part of my friendships, my family, my community. And if you're afraid that they wouldn't like him, they wouldn't get along with him, they would judge you, I would pay attention to that, because I want to bring people home who I immediately feel that people are probably going to enjoy, because I enjoy them too. And if I am fearful of mixing my personal life and my dating life, something's not right.
So the second question is, what does it mean when a guy says, I'm emotionally unavailable?
It means he just wants to have sex with you and not date you.
So I want to just tag on to that. I want a nice guy that I find hot. I want to go back to that because I want to, I want to poke at that a little bit because to me, like if you're just looking for the outside package, that changes over time too. We all age and everything else. So make sure that the hot includes, like, I really like all of his
Ooh,
qualities, not just the wrapping. The trappings are nice. So you should think your person is hot. Absolutely. But just
yes.
don't get caught by the persona that's out there. So
By the way, let me just say there's a really good book on dating called If the Buddha Dated by a woman named Charlotte Castle, Kasl. And Dr. Castle's a friend of mine. She also wrote If the Buddha Got Married, which is a great book too. But it really is a book on what she calls spiritual dating. And I think that it's a really good exercise. And when I read the book, I thought, well, it's going to be all about, spiritual dating. But right there in that book on spiritual dating, Charlotte Castle said, if he's not a seven, if he or she is not a seven on your 10 scale, don't date them. And I think that's important because many of us in recovery think, well, I need to date the right person. And I remember thinking the right person looks like this, looks like that. They got to be this. And the right person for me is so different than what I thought it would be. I promise you. But I can write down and think about what is a healthy person. Like, I don't want someone who's married. I don't want someone who's in just left a relationship. I don't want someone who's actively using. I don't want someone, and if this is good for us, I don't want someone who's never been in therapy. Because I already know, and here's for you, I already know that I'm going to pick someone who probably has issues because I have issues. And that's natural. We often pick people who are at the same level on a whole bunch of ways as we are. And then sometimes they get worse. We follow them into the rabbit hole. But you shouldn't expect that you're going to meet the perfect together person. What you should expect is that you're going to be able to discern which vulnerable parts you can live with and which vulnerable parts are going to hurt you. If he's cold and distant and unavailable, that's a serious issue, So, but you don't even get to know this stuff until you have time dating. It just takes time.
agree. So there's a question, why is it not about sex? I've read SA 101. It's hard to not see it as completely about sex.
What sex addiction?
Sex addiction. Why is sex addiction not really about sex?
Because I'll give you the perfect answer. Most sex addicts spend about 3 days planning, 3 to 5 days planning their sexual experience and 4 minutes having it. They're cruising, they're online, they're looking at porn, and then they finally get to their whatever, and then it's over. So if you look at the whole arc of someone's behavior and their excitement about going and doing it, they spend a lot more time in fantasy than they actually spend in the behavior. And when they're in that fantasy, their heart is pounding, their pupils are dilated, they're in a state of hyper arousal because they're so excited about what they're going to go do that it allows them to escape emotionally, to stabilize emotionally, to disappear emotionally. The whole emotional state of sexual fantasy and romantic fantasy is really what sex addiction is about. The sex, sex is sex. But what I think it might be, wow, I could ride on that for a week. So it's a very literal answer. It's sex addiction is not about sex because sex addicts spend all this time planning it, thinking about it, but actual act, 5 minutes.
Oh, you upped it by a minute. Okay. So I've met a woman
I know that
online.
women pay attention to how long men talk about having sex. Okay, I can up it longer, but whatever.
I've met a woman online who I'm attracted to. The attraction is mutual, but because she is in another country, I cannot touch her at this point, although she's open to my visiting her by year's end. So our conversations have been about getting to know one another. I'm also quite new to online dating scene, and I'm wondering, is it realistic to build a relationship with someone via that medium? As a recovering addict, I practice authentic communication with her, but I'm fearful that I'm investing in what could become a relationship Ponzi scheme. Any suggestions or tips?
Well, again, I think that as a recovering person, when you find yourself questioning a situation you're in, it's probably something you should be questioning. So think about what a sex and love addict is. We're people who use romantic and sexual fantasy to cope. We use romantic and sexual fantasy to stabilize difficult emotions, to tolerate stress, to escape, to soothe ourselves. I mean, we sexualize for a whole bunch of psychological reasons, but ends up in about the same place. It's to comfort ourselves, if you will. So now let me tie this into your question.
She's in another country, and is it
Right. So the
realistic?
question is, especially if you're a woman women tend more to love addiction. I worry that it's hard enough for us in dating to see who someone really is because of all the stuff I talked about, and all the stuff we attach to them. And it's even harder if you haven't met them in person. And I have heard many stories of people who carry out fantasy relationships and they really think they're going to work out until they meet them, and then they're horrified. Doesn't matter whether you're a man, you're a woman, a relationship that has not taken place yet is one where you haven't met. Now, I can have relationships with people online, like a pen pal or I have people I work with who do things related to, let's say, tech that I'm involved with. I've never met them in person. We work perfectly well online. They have a job, I have a job, I enjoy them, I like them. We chat about this and that, but mainly it's about getting the task done. I don't need to ever meet those people. They perform a function for me, I perform a function for them, and we like each other in the process. But when you're talking about love and commitment and meaning in a relationship, you need to be with the person. And I would not recommend dating someone for a year and putting a lot of hopes and dreams into that and then going and meeting them. I just think that is a setup to be very, very disappointed. And to think, what was I doing for that year when I could have been dating a whole bunch of other people? And let me just say that to you. Dating, without question, is a numbers game. Most people quit before the miracle happens, meaning it probably takes dating, I know you're going to hate this, 10 to 12 people a year in brightly lit, ugly coffee shops before you find someone that you might really enjoy, might really get along with, might really be compatible with. It takes we have to go through a lot of people in a very appropriate, boundaried way, not having sex with everyone we meet, before we find someone we might really get along with. And that can take a while. And that can take a bunch of people. Most people give up before the miracle happens. Oh, I've dated 3 people, it didn't work out. Forget it. I'm not going to date anymore. I'm just going to have sex, or I'm going to be alone. So again, I worry that after a year of only focusing on this person, that you're going to regret you lost a year of your life. And so my question to you would be, why aren't you dating other people while you're dating this person? As long as you're not dating him, you can't be physical, you can't be sexual, you're just getting to know each other online. Why don't you date other people? It's not a betrayal. You've never met him in person. You're not committed to
It's a him asking about a her, but it doesn't matter. So
I would say to her, if it were me, I would say, I really am interested in like you, but if we're not going to meet for a year, I probably need to find situations where I can get to know people and meet people in real time. Now, if you could find a way to get to meet each other faster and you can see a path to being together, that's great. But a year is way too long a time to date online without having met somebody, especially for us.
Well, and a tag in on that is like, even if you go see her, and that'll be for a finite period of time, and it still is. So everybody can be on their best behavior for that finite period of time, but that doesn't really, get you seeing what each other is like for a longer period of time.
And I want to say something more about that. Relationships, the reason that we grow when we're in a relationship is because we have to put our own needs aside and give something to someone else. And being in a relationship is a constant stream of making those decisions. Am I going to tend to you? Am I going to tend to me? What's important? We do it unconsciously all day long, but it is. The problem with not living together and being so distant is you don't really have to give up a whole lot. You don't really have to focus on their needs because you're not sharing the toothbrush. You're not having to, pay for dinner. You're not. So a lot of those stressors that come up and let me try it this way. I know for me, and I think this is most of the people I work with, in fact, most healthy people, when I'm needful and my spouse is feeling fairly fulfilled, we're great. And when he is needful and I'm feeling fairly together, we're great. But when we're both needful, it can be really difficult. We might end up yelling at each other. So, how do you know? Again, there's just for every reason. I think that finding a way to an in-person experience is essential.
Is there a chance to have an intimate, healthy marriage with a narcissist? My husband is SA and we are both in recovery, although in different stages, but I find I worry more about his narcissistic behavior. FYI, I know your thoughts on all addicts displaying narcissistic behaviors, but even when he was has bouts of sobriety, he still shows signs of being narcissistic.
Okay, so first of all, narcissism is a good thing. If you didn't have, narcissism is in its healthiest expression, self-esteem and a sense of self-worth and the ability to get up and get out in the world and think you can do it. Because people who don't have a healthy amount of narcissism stay in bed and shake because they're afraid of the world. So you need some narcissism. Now, are some of us more narcissistic than others? You bet. I'm very narcissistic. I'm so sorry to tell you that, but I am. You know what? I live with someone and have spent an 18-year relationship with someone who's not. And I'm a very needy kind of, pay attention. Well, if you're married to an addict, you know what that's like. For some reason, my husband doesn't mind. He has taught me when he's available to give and when he's not, and when it's okay to ask. I mean, we have learned to negotiate my needfulness, but he gives me a lot because I need a lot. And I have no shame about that. And there's nothing wrong. It's called pro-dependence. I wrote a book about this. There's nothing wrong with your giving to your lover or partner's vulnerability and they're giving to your vulnerabilities, and you're leading with strength and they're leading with strength. We're not supposed to be two completely together people who, become a together couple. We're supposed to be two people with vulnerabilities and needs and weaknesses and strengths who find comfort in how we fit together and how we negotiate the world. So if your husband's narcissism leaves you feeling unloved, uncared about, unattended to, if it's all about him all the time, if he is keeping secrets from you and lying and manipulating and, just making it all about himself, that's pathological narcissism. That means that his needfulness has turned into, I don't care about you and I'm going to get what I want no matter what. That's pathological. And so there's a difference between, pay attention to me, I'm important, please, I need, here I am, wait, not you, me, not you, that we all do that, narcissists in particular. But the person who says, I come first, and that's how it has to be, that's pathological. And so I would ask, and some people, by the way, love narcissists. Thank you, those of you out there who do, we appreciate it. You won't be in audiences for us to stand on stages if you didn't like us. So, there is room for people who love narcissistic people. And by the way, I'll tell you one more thing. I probably shouldn't say this. Narcissistic men have more sex and are more successful at getting sex, in part because women are biologically conditioned to seek out that man who's going to be the risk taker, the one who's going to push himself out a little further. A woman will want to have a baby, be impregnant and by the guy who's a little bit of a risk taker, a little bit of a dark guy, a little bit of a challenge. By the way, if you've ever read women's porn like Twilight or True Blood, or 50 Shades, it's all about the bad boy that the good girl falls in love with and believes that she sees a glimmer of light in him and she's going to turn him into a good boy. That's what all female porn is about. It's about turning the bad boy into a good boy. So women like a little bit of bad boy. Not a bad thing as long as we're not being hurtful, damaging, and not all women, by the way. There are narcissistic women and they need to shine, and men who help them shine. But all I'm saying to you is that narcissism in and of itself is not necessarily a bad thing. And if you are someone who loves your husband and it delights in his being in the spotlight, my husband is thrilled when I get on the stage and I'm teaching 300 people. He couldn't be more proud of me. He doesn't feel like, well, what a narcissist. He's standing on that stage and getting all those attention from people. My healthy narcissism is embraced by him. However, if I was in the audience trying to get people to go up to my room for sex, and that would be pathological narcissism, I don't think you would appreciate that. So, you can appreciate and love a narcissist in the full flush of their narcissism, provided they're doing healthy things and living healthy life, and they see that you exist.
So she continues, what is your advice on how a wife of an SA can try to get him to understand and sympathize, in all caps, with all of the harm and trauma he has caused me? I find he has zero amount of sympathy. It causes a ton of anger and resentment on my part.
Yeah. Well, we don't know how long these couples have been working on this. So let me just say, as I often do, it takes about a year or more, provided your husband is really working on himself, going to meet, like you have evidence that is provable that he is working on himself, attending to these issues, trying to be a better husband, and not having affairs and fooling around. In those circumstances, which are kind of the best of circumstances, right? He's working on it, you guys are working on things. It's going to be a year or more before you are out of rage, feeling out of control, looking for signs that he's at it again. It takes spouses over a year to get to a place where they feel safe again. Unfortunately, for those of us who are addicts, when we are about 2 or 3 months sober and we have a few friends in recovery and we've gotten a chip or two, we are ready, all ready for you to not be angry at us anymore, and for you to be more forgiving, and for you to say, good job, you're going to lots of meetings, I'm so proud of you. Unfortunately, that is not your job. You know, your job is to be angry. Your job is to hurt. Your job is to struggle with the consequences of what has been brought into your relationship. It's not that your husband or spouse doesn't need someone to cheer for or encourage his recovery. It's just that's not your job. That's the job of his sponsor, his therapist, people like us. I'm very thrilled that he's doing well in recovery, and he needs that validation. But in the first couple of months, you're going to be too upset to give it to him, as you should be. So part of what happens for couples in early recovery, and this is difficult for both of them, is that you're both so angry at each other and so mistrusting and so hurt. And you might say, well, why is he angry at me when he hurt me? Well, he's angry because you're mad at him. He's angry because he disappointed you. He's angry at himself. It's just a big pile. In those circumstances, the person that you're most used to turning to have your back, the person who knows you the most, your best friend and partner, is not the person who can help you, because he's the one who hurt you. And you are not his best friend, his partner, his, meant to be forever person, is not going to be able to support him because he hurt you and you are hurting. So your inability to support your husband's recovery in the early stages, other than glad you're doing that, keep it up, is perfectly healthy and normal. And his desire to have you get over it faster is perfectly healthy and normal. What you're asking for, however, is something that he needs to learn. So I wrote a book about this. I wrote a book called Out of the Doghouse, a relationship-saving guide for men caught cheating. And the reason I wrote that book, Out of the Doghouse, is because I have worked with so many men over the years, 25 years of treating male sex addicts and women too, but working with men who had devastated their marriages, who destroyed their wives' self-esteem, but they didn't have a clue. They were like, oh, it was just a lap dance, it was just an affair, it was just a few this or that, and I'm not doing it anymore, and I'm working on it, so what's the big deal? They didn't, and men tend to not understand what that level of betrayal does to a spouse, especially if it's a woman, especially if you have kids, especially if you're involved in family life and you've been together for a long time. It's going to devastate you. And my experience is that most men are trying to fix a problem, having cheated on you, that is much deeper than they realize. So I wrote this book called Out of the Doghouse, which I would recommend you buy for him and read, and then throw it at him and say, this is how I want you to understand my problem, because he doesn't get it. And I wrote a book for men in their language. Hey, dude, you really fucked this one up. What are you going to do now, in their language, to understand what they've done to you? I want your husband to have an understanding of the length and breadth of the recovery for the partner, and that he is unreasonable if he expects you to be bright and cheery and happy when he comes home one night and is late. You're not going to be bright and cheery and happy. You're going to be worried. And is he at it again? And that's perfectly normal. But from his perspective, it's like, I've been going to meetings forever. I've been working on this forever. Why are you still mad at me? Well, because it's only been 6 months. For you, it's only been 6 months. For him, it's been 6 months. And that's because he needs to grow and learn better what you're going through. So buy the book. I'll make 12 cents, and hopefully I'll help your marriage.
I'm going to tag on too, for those of you that identify as Christian. Marnie Faree collaborated on the book, co-authored a version that is the redemptive guide for men and has biblical context. So there's 2 versions. The original is all Dr. Rob, and the other is collaborated with Marnie Faree. So either has the same type of message for men to learn how to rebuild trust with their partners and get some sympathy, or really empathy. So I want to answer this. I want you to answer this one. So the 25-year-old said, I'm mainly worried about her saying no and being embarrassed. So can you talk about, so this goes back to, so this is the 25-year-old that wants to have a friends with benefits with the 42-year-old woman. And we said no, right. But he's really worried about being embarrassed. Let's talk about being embarrassed in recovery.
Embarrassed because why?
So what's going to happen to you if you're embarrassed in recovery?
Well, what would it be embarrassing about this situation? I'm not sure I
No,
quite.
he's saying I'm mainly worried about her saying no if he calls her up and asks her
Well,
to be
that's because
friends
you
with
didn't ask
benefits.
her. And and your fear of embarrassment is another way of thinking that this might not be the best. In other words, if you're fearing embarrassment and you're worried about what's going to happen, it probably means it isn't a good idea. So why don't you look at your fear of embarrassment as being, this isn't a good idea, and she might look at it also as not being a good idea, and I can follow through on this exciting idea that I have, but if she sees it like Rob sees it, she's going to say, what, are you kidding me? I'm 45 years old and you're this much younger and trying to get well, and you'd be a distraction, then you would be embarrassed. So guess what? Here's how to save yourself all the embarrassment. Don't call her.
My husband brought prostitutes to our house. I was visiting a sick relative with the children at the time. When I found out, I was shocked. Is this common behavior for SAs?
I can't say if it's common. I mean, acting out sexually is common. Acting out in every kind of way is common. There are some men who work very, very hard to keep their sexual secrets outside the home. They travel for work or whatever, and what they do is out there somewhere, but when they're near home, they never flirt, they never, you just would have no idea. And by the way, that speaks to me a lot as a therapist of some of their brokenness and what they learned growing up about, where you bring your dirty laundry and where you keep it. Because the guy who is kind of sleeping around his neighborhood and it's the babysitter and the dry cleaners and somebody in your bed, that tells me a lot about how he grew up and some of the icky stuff that maybe he grew up to tolerate. Neither here nor there. It just tells me a lot. I think I don't think that the man who brings a woman into your bed is any sicker than the man who doesn't. I think that the man who brings a woman into your bed is thinking, oh, well, we'll start in the garage, or we'll do it in the basement, or somehow he's trying to sneak his way into, I want to have sex with this person, but I don't, and eventually, probably landed in your bed. But what's sad is that how do I say this? Clearly, he doesn't understand the double tragedy that is. Like for him, it may have been just convenient. It was a bed that was empty and she was there and you weren't there. So it made sense to him, but that he didn't get the double tragedy, that not only is he sleeping around, but he's soiling his own home, is sad. Sad for you, sad for him. And it speaks to me to the amount of work that he has ahead of him to understand that his job is to protect his home and value his partner, not poison the well. But yes, I mean, if you're a sex addict and you're really in the disease, any bed will do. And your feelings are not what he's thinking about at all. What he's thinking about is, can I change the sheets, wash the sheets, and get them back on the bed fast enough so that she won't notice?
So picture it, date number 1 or 2 in ugly lit coffee shop. How do I know if I need to keep seeing him if I don't feel chemistry? Are there other criteria I should be discussing with my female friends who help me vet the dates? I'm asking for practical advice on how to ditch a guy nicely.
So you have to know yourself a little bit around this. In other words, if you're someone who freezes up on dates and gets kind of fearful and finds yourself distancing, or if you're someone who used to drink and use, or if you're someone who's an active sex addict, and that's the way you approach dating and sex with a lot of intensity and unconsciousness before, you may not know how to determine whether you like someone or not, because if the intensity isn't there, if the mind-blowing, we've got to have sex right away and get loaded or whatever isn't there, then maybe there's nothing there. And however, maybe there's nothing there. So, I really do. So in the beginning of my own recovery, I tried to date on paper, and I said I wanted someone who had this kind of profession, who made this kind of money, who had this. I wasn't really that focused on who they were as a person, but more job, car, apartment, the basics. But I don't want to say to you about that, but I think that I want to actually get this right for you. So Tammy, I know I seem lost. So I'm really not lost. I'm lost.
No.
Because it's such a hard question. It's like, how do you know when you might want to pursue someone further? And, in part, I do believe absolutely there needs to be a little spark. There's just got to be a little bit of lust. There's got to be a little, I looked in your eye, you looked in my eye, and we know that might be fun. Doesn't mean we're saying it. But if you're not flirting with each other on some level a little bit, then maybe he'd be a nice guy to have as a friend. but I want to date people that I'm attracted to and that I feel sexual about. And there was nothing wrong with that, but how I carried that out in the past was the problem. Now I have learned how to date and be, hopefully in time, be sexual with someone who is the right person for me, because I've taken the time to figure that out with my friends and support. But yeah, I mean, if they're boring, they're boring. You can't help that. Just move on. Remember, dating's a numbers game. Ding, ding, time for number 2.
There you go. My SA husband only started going to sexaholic meetings in February of this year after being addicted to porn since adolescence. He is now approaching 70 years old. I know he started using porn after finding his father's stash of magazines when he was in middle school. He started masturbating to images that far back. Then he went to porn theaters from the time he was age 16 until 25. Moving out of state for his work interrupted his use. He has never truly stopped for any significant period of time. He only agreed to go to SA meetings because I insisted. Surprisingly, the meetings have had a huge impact on him, and he seems to be sincere in working the steps. Sadly, he still rages at me. How can he be in recovery if he still treats me this way? My trauma therapist has told me his need for true spirituality is a missing piece. She recommended 90 meetings in 90 days. My husband flatly refused. Should I believe he is in recovery or not?
You want to try this one, Tammy? Because, well, first of all, what's the question in here?
Well, so she's wondering, with the behavior he's exhibiting and only going to sexaholics meetings probably once a week, she doesn't state that, but I'm kind of guessing that, since February, so a very short time. So is he in recovery? I would say no. I'd say he's at the early stages of trying to possibly be in recovery, but you can't get recovery in a handful of so he started in middle school. So he's got 55 years of the same behavior, and 10 meetings is not going to fix that.
I mean, I started acting out when I was 15 or 14, something like that. I think when I finally just got to look at stopping, which is in my 20s, so I'd only been at it at that level well, it was quite a level, but I was only at it for about 12 years. It took me a couple of years to stop. And I think for those of us who start early, it really speaks to early injury, a lot more issues and trauma in early childhood. And so there's all this pressure and issue and stuff going on that drives it forward. If I were 70 or let's say I'm 58, if I had started at 15 and continued to 58, which is now, I mean, I'd be a couple of years away from being able to have an honest, meaningful relationship, and certainly a couple of years away from even fully stopping. That's me. But I do think that a lifetime with the behavior, especially when it started early. So, but let me just back up from that. And his recovery is what it is. What I'm worried about is what you're getting abused.
Right.
How is it that what are the situations in which it's okay for him to be abusive to you? And how is that ever okay, no matter what is going on with him? And how can you protect yourself and make sure that you are not the object of that abuse, verbal or physical or any kind, because you don't deserve it. And you certainly don't deserve it if you've been putting up with his emotional struggles all his life and he's just now beginning to look at it. So I would suggest that you get some support. And here's a way I would do it. We run a weekly group or 2 on sex and relationship healing that is a drop-in group for women who are being betrayed by their husbands or have been. Drop in. The best thing that you can do is not even ask me questions, but ask those other women, what are they going through? How are they dealing with it? What is it like to have a husband who cheated for 20 years? What's it like to have a husband who cheated for 50 years? I'm working with a woman this week who's only been married I'm working with a guy this week who I don't know that relationship will continue because they're not married yet and they don't have all these commitments, and his spouse is just finding out, and she's kind of like, I'm not sure I want to be in this. So, it's really my hope for you is that you're taking care of you, that you're getting your needs met, and that if you're expecting for a miracle from this guy at 70, not likely. I mean, I'm not saying that we can't do a lot of work and act differently and be different, but that takes an extreme amount of motivation. So if I wanted to act differently and be differently, I would pour myself into it. And by the way, I did 27 years of therapy, 35 years of program. I wanted a different life. Your husband may be satisfied enough with his life. He just wants to stop some of that porn stuff. And so how serious a problem is this to him is really the question. Is it a serious enough a problem where he's going to go more often, get more help, and really work at being respectful of you? Or is it just he's going to go for the feel good, and I don't want to be ashamed about what I was doing, and I need some people to hang out with experience, but not really do the work that will help him heal? Just going to meetings is not enough. Just going to meetings for someone who's been 70, 50 years acting out is not enough. He needs therapy. He needs support groups. He
Treatment.
needs treatment. These interrupting these cycles at a deep and meaningful level after so many years is not. So going to meetings is like, pulling off a thread and pulling off another thread and pulling off another thread, but it's not like a complete reweave. And when you're 70, you don't have a lot of time for reweaving. I know this, so but most of all, I would be looking at what it is you want for yourself in this relationship, how you can take care of yourself in this relationship, and what kind of boundaries that you want to set with him that he needs to respect, because you do not deserve any kind of abuse.
Yeah, I noticed that too, because you said he is still raging. So apparently that was happening when he was using the porn actively as well as now. So I'm glad you're seeing a trauma therapist. I think that's important for you. And Dr. Rob is right. There are drop-in groups for partners. There's one, today is Monday. So on Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. Pacific time, Brittany Mangum has a Prodependence Aligned. It's a Prodependence drop-in group for partners. Please join that. There are meetings for the addicts too. So like last night, there was a meeting at 8 p.m. Pacific time for men with sex and porn addiction. There was one at 10:45 this morning, all Pacific time. There are lots of opportunities, and we're adding more to the site. So I hope he will join that as well. I wasn't being tongue-in-cheek when I said treatment. Dr. Rob is doing treatment in Los Angeles, 2-week program for men. It's if he's really serious. He also mentioned throwing out of the dog, reading and then throwing out of the doghouse at somebody.
At him.
Yes, yeah, throwing it at him. So I mean, that's definitely another resource.
Actually, I would recommend in your case that you read out of the doghouse.
Yeah.
Sometimes spouses don't even know how they should be treated because they've been treated so badly for so long.
Yeah. Yes, I agree with that too. So there, is there no hope? Absolutely not. I think that there's always hope, and he started going to meetings. So, hopefully he's getting a sponsor.
You reap what you sow.
Yes.
1 or 2 meetings a week, you're going to get, without a real in-depth before that, it's just going to be picking at the problem over the surface and calming yourself down and but it's not the deep work that you're looking for.
And especially, I mean, if he's been doing this all his life, it's one of those things where he's doing that because something else was uncomfortable. So taking away the porn and not addressing the things that were uncomfortable will not be very tolerable.
So Tammy, she asked a further question because I read it, and it said,
yes.
Should I push him to do the 90 and 90? And I would say, it's not your job to push your husband to do anything. What I would say to him is, I would be a lot more comfortable if I saw you participating more, and I think it would be really helpful if you did what was asked of you. And I think if you don't, I'm going to feel really disappointed, or whatever it means to you. Now, if you consider that pushing, I consider that just saying what's true for you, and then you let it go. He goes or he doesn't. But that's what I meant by motivation. If he loves you and he sees your pain and he understands what this has cost, he understands how big the issue is, there's not going to be any, I don't want to go to those meetings. What else has he got to do? He's retired. He can go to meetings morning, noon, and night if he wants to.
And he's not looking at porn. So he's got extra time. So
I do want to say quickly, because I know we're running out of time, that because it's important for me to say this, that I have a podcast, and it's very, very popular, I'm glad to say. It's called Sex, Love, and Addiction. And I have gotten together with some of the leading experts in the country on sexuality, intimacy, relationships, and infidelity. And I think we've come up with about 45 amazing shows. So note that podcasts are free. The drop-in groups that Tammy is talking about on sexual relationship healing, there's no charge. We're trying to give as much as possible to those of you who don't have the resources or may not be able to find yourself in treatment. I also want to say that we are also providing treatment. So as Tammy said, every 2 weeks, we just started today, every 2 weeks we are running intensives for drug addiction and sex and drug addiction, because there aren't that many places where people can get the help they need for these issues. And I'm doing a lot of training of staff right now, so I am actively involved in the process. I have to say, Tammy, by the way, I would say to you, it's been really good for me to be back working with clients after a number of years because, well, I don't want to say the reason. I forgot how troubled they are. Like, I forgot how a man who's been acting out sexually for years and years and years can say that so many things that are clearly a problem aren't. I forgot how much denial these folks can have. And I forgot in particular how they can think that the problem is just about their sexual behavior and not related to all the other problems in their lives, that they will compartmentalize and say, well, yeah, maybe a little bit too much of this sex stuff, but I'm still a good dad, I'm still a good husband, and the truth is they're none of those things because it's affected their whole lives. And that's one of the things that I've been reminded of how pervasive addiction affects your entire life. You can't pretend that this is over here and everything else is okay. It just doesn't work.
And I hope that the loved one, I mean, I know that the loved ones are supported in the process as well. And I hope that that's validating for them to know that you and the clinical staff get it.
And I, as from me and the clinical staff, I want to say to any partners in the room, because I want to say this every time I hear any hint of this, please understand, as the spouse or partner of an addict, there is nothing you can ever do or say or not do or not say to make us drink, use, or sexually act out. You can stop having sex with us, you can be angry at us, you can nag us, you can complain, you can gain 50 pounds. It doesn't matter. All of that is justification for what I want to go do. But listen, I can justify what I want to go to do anyway. You can give me reasons or not. It could be I could go see a stripper because things didn't go well at work. So don't think that you can influence my sobriety in that way. If I want to be sober and I want to stay committed to this, then it doesn't matter how uncomfortable my home life is. And if it's really uncomfortable, I will live in another room for a while or move out for a while or do whatever it takes to maintain this focus on my sobriety. You getting angry, you getting upset, you getting being deeply disappointed is expected and normal. And no partner should feel like, well, I have to withhold how I feel because I'm afraid it will lead to him or her acting out. Now, I don't want you to yell at us or abuse us. That's not okay either. But say what you're feeling and stand behind it, knowing that if we choose to act out, that's on us and never on you. It's important that you know that.
There's a nice comment that I think will be a nice place to end. I would like to make a comment and say thank you to both of us for our services, but the podcast has been educational and therapeutic for this person, and we're really happy to hear that. And Dr. Rob mentioned leaders from all over the country. There are people outside the country that have contributed to those as well. So we really will continue to build that, but I find them fascinating. I learn something every single time I listen to another one. So keep listening. I know you'll keep recording them. So I think that's all the time we have.
Can I just say one thing, Tammy?
Sure.
It was such a pleasure to do this with you. I really appreciate your
Likewise.
your sincerity, your kindness, your empathy is really felt, and it makes a difference when we do this together. And I just want to thank you for that.
Thank you. I love doing them with you as well. So, okay, until next week.
Later.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye for now.